right, welcome everyone. We start to see some people coming in and some AI people coming in too, which seems very fitting given the conversation. Thank you all for spending some time in the afternoon with us. We're very excited to have this conversation with you and to just hopefully help you think about the world of AI and how kids and how adults are working through it in a different way as we go through this discussion. As you start coming in, please introduce yourself in the chat. Say what city, state you're coming from, and the last thing you asked AI, if you're willing to share it with us. We have some, and as everyone starts coming in, we'll have our panelists start to introduce themselves, and also would ask that you share where you're coming from and the last thing you asked AI as well as why you're here having this important conversation. For those who don't know me, I'm Maria Barrera. I'm the founder and CEO of Clayful. At Clayful, we provide on-demand mental health support to students, families, and educators. And our goal is to reach everyone where they're at, give them that support in the moment, but be coaches, not crutches. So I think this is going to be a really interesting conversation today around how AI is sort of filling a similar need of supporting in the moment, but maybe creating different dependencies that might be hindering certain things. Spoiler alert. So I'm excited to have this conversation with these amazing humans who have been thinking about this and diving into this work for a long time, given how new AI is. So Morgan, I'm going to hand it over to you first to introduce yourself and get us rolling.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Maria, for also having us here too. It's definitely an honor to be a part of this group. My name is Morgan Nugent. I'm a superintendent up here in Fall River Joint Unified School District up here in Northern California. 7 years as a superintendent, 29 years in education, and one of the nice parts of it is I actually had a chance to be part of the task group here at California State Boards Association to help develop the policy on AI use in the schools. And also a proud member of having Clayful being in my schools now for about 3 years too, and just its impact on our kids. So thank you so much for having us here. And the last thing I ended up searching on AI was taking a look at the NAEP scores from Wyoming and comparing it to California, and what's the difference in the math standards since they have the highest and we're only the fourth largest GDP. Is what are we doing that's wrong, and what can we do to make this better? And it's really interesting to see some of the data and some of the differences between those two.
My gosh, how do I follow that? Hello everyone, my name is Allison. I am the Chief R&D Officer at the Rhythm Project. I am calling from you right now from Jersey City because I'm coming hot off some travel, but I'm actually normally based in the East Bay in California. And I am a child of both coasts. I grew up here in New Jersey, and New York City is my city, but the Bay Area is becoming home too. And the last thing I asked AI for a personal reason was to ask it what kind of gift or acts of care I can give to a new mom. One of my dear friends just became a mom. She just came back from the hospital. I do not have children of my own, so I'm trying to imagine what it's like to be navigating all of that, and how do I support in a way that feels like it's not going to add more labor or is a one-off, but is going to nourish her and really meet what she's in the moment, because I'm just trying to figure it out. How do I be a better friend? That's what I asked.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing. Jenny, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I'm Joni, and I am a licensed professional counselor, a speaker, a mindfulness teacher, and a retreat leader. I've been helping people unplug and reconnect to their deepest self, rediscovering purpose and meaning in their life, whether it's through retreats, professional development, or my upcoming book called The AI Antidote: Preserving Human Connection and Emotional Intelligence in a Tech-Driven World. I am residing in the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area. This is my hometown where I grew up. And the last time I used AI was actually to analyze a really complicated medical report for a friend. She didn't know what it meant and she didn't want to wait for her doctor. So I dropped it in and it gave a really great simplified explanation.
I love that. There's so much breadth in how we're all using the technology, and I see some interesting ideas in the chat as well, whether it's to plan on hands-on activities to improve an email. I use that all the time. Seems a lot of like education use cases in here being shared, but I like that you all brought into the personal ways that you're using it as well, and how it's powerful of a tool it can really be. So today our goal is not to talk about like, is AI bad, is it good, right? Like we know that AI is in our lives, right? And we know that there's so many different use cases and ways that we as adults are using it and that our kids are using it. Really, it's to have a conversation around what does this rise of AI mean at this moment in time, given the world that we're currently living in, right? So in preparation for this, pulled a couple of stats, some which might be surprising to you all, some of which might be you've heard before. So the time that per day that teens spend with their friends is down 66% in the last decade. And you can see here, there's a little bit of a trend with the rise of social media and how when, a decade ago was 2015, TikTok was founded in 2016 and really took over during the pandemic, right? So we start seeing how the rise of all these different social media tools have really impacted the time that kids are spending with each other. The 2 hours plus that they were spending on an ongoing basis has now turned to 45 minutes. And we see the themes over and over again that young people today are experiencing more and more loneliness that they ever were, right? I love the quote, "We're more connected than we've ever been, and yes, yet we've never been more lonely," because it just speaks so it's so raw to where we are today as a society. And there's some research that actually shows that being socially disconnected is the same as smoking 15 cigarettes per day. Wow, this really hit me, right? Because we're seeing not just the impact of social disconnection on mental health, but on our physical health as well. And we know here, the people here know that the two are very interconnected, right? But to see it being put this way really shows us that this is an imperative moment where we're seeing these massive forces where we're feeling more and more disconnected, more and more lonely, and thus as a society, we're looking for other solutions. And that's where AI is coming in. Nearly 3 in 4 teens use AI for social emotional reasons, and over half of them use it regularly. This was also pretty impactful to me, right? We've seen the rise of ChatGPT and how quickly these tools have taken over and they've embedded themselves into the tools that kids are using every day, whether that's Snapchat, whether that's Instagram. So we're already seeing the impact in the amount of kids using these tools as it continues to grow day in and day out. So what does that mean? And why do we think, given this context that we're in, why are students turning to AI? Let's start there first. Maybe Allison, you can kick us off with the research on what you're seeing and what this means.
Yeah. So I remember when about a year ago, this was like October, November of last year, much of the conversation about how kids were using AI was mostly about what are they doing in school? Are they using this to cheat? Are they using this to finish their homework for them or write their essays for them? Those are all important and valid concerns to have, right? There's some real concerns from the research about cognitive offloading and the way it's eroding critical thinking. But when we were actually in conversation with young people, we asked them, beyond for school, what are you asking AI? What are you using it for? And they were telling us, I'm using it to ask for advice for, oh, I just got this text from a friend. How do I respond? It seems like they're upset at me. Or they're having a bad day and they rant into chat to be like, how do I make meaning of this? Or they're using AI to dream about their future. Who do I want to be when I grow up? What does it take to be a professional soccer player, right? And so when we asked about this, we think about what are all these things coming from? Like why is it that they're turning to AI? And we asked them this question: what about AI is particularly attractive to you for these use cases, for these social and emotional reasons? This is January of 2025, so this was 10 months ago, right? And what they were telling us was, it doesn't judge me. It doesn't, it's not going to punish me. It's not going to judge me poorly for asking a question that I'm afraid to ask other people in my life. It is going to provide me support and advice. I often feel like I'm a burden to other people when I go to them with my problems. So here's a place where I feel like I can manage it for myself. And so underneath that, and then we asked a follow-up question of who in your community do you see engaging with this AI the most in these ways? And for some of the young people that we spoke to, they're like, a lot of times it's the kids that are the loners in our class, right? They're in class and they're waiting for class to start and they're on their phones and they're talking to character AI or ChatGPT. Remember, this is 10 months ago, right? So imagine just how quickly this technology has moved and evolved now. And so when we hear that, what we're hearing from young people is that they're turning to AI to fill these really deep needs to be heard, to be vulnerable, to be cared for, to get non-judgmental care and advice. And so we have to ask the question of, why is it that AI is fulfilling that? And what is it about their real life relationships that are not fulfilling those things? And so again, like continuing that conversation, when we talk to the young people in our lives, they often talk about the social circumstances that they've set up. They're like, I feel so much pressure to be perfect all the time. And I feel like so much of our relationships, whether it's friendships or the people in my life, are so fragile. I'm afraid of standing up for myself. I'm afraid to be real with people. I'm afraid to get in conflict with people because that might turn into rupture, that I don't know how to repair a relationship. And all of that is exacerbated by social media, right? If you're on the outs with a friend, all of a sudden there's no chance for direct resolution because all of a sudden you see on Instagram, they've cut you out of the friend group, they've posted an IG story, you're not there anymore, right? There's so much lateral sort of relational aggression and in and out. And so I think all of that to say, young people are telling us that is actually the social circumstances in their life, right? The human connections that are not being met, that's driving them to turn to AI as an alternative. And what's terrifying about this is some of this research that's coming out is telling us this technology is actually pretty good at resolving loneliness. Some of their research coming, for example, from MIT and from OpenAI, showed that people who use ChatGPT had a reduction in loneliness, but increased social isolation. So in other words, it increased their sense of loneliness. It made them feel less lonely, but it increased the number of minutes that they spent alone and less time in community with other people. And so we have to ask that question: at what cost are we making this trade-off if we're saying this is solving loneliness but scaling isolation? So I'll just pause there.
That is a very fascinating last point to end on. And yeah, it makes me question, like, almost like, what's the difference? And like, if you don't feel lonely but you're isolated, does it matter? Joni, I feel like you would have some interesting things to say there.
For sure. I really think for a lot of kids, depending on the age range that we're talking about, this struggle that they have to communicate with each other kind of started with all the isolation around COVID. They weren't able to build the skills to make those deep, close social connections. And so they are in this place where they don't have the skills, they don't have the emotional intelligence skills to connect with each other. And even for those of us who hopefully do have those emotional intelligence skills, let's face it, human communication is messy, right? Because we all have our own viewpoint, we all have our own way of communicating, and we're not going to say things right all the time. And AI, those AI chatbots, or even large language models like ChatGPT, they are programmed to be validating, to be encouraging. And so that does fill this social need that they're not getting from their peers, or they might not even be getting from their families. Of course, and I know we'll get into talking about this later, you know, in some ways, like Allison said, that's great if they are their loneliness is decreasing in some ways. However, the cost is sometimes greater than we imagine. And in my own private practice, as well as in my own research for my upcoming book, I've heard such terrible stories about how people are attaching themselves to AI chatbots. Last year around this time, there was a 14-year-old boy who developed a relationship with a chatbot on Character AI, and he ended up taking his own life because he believed that he could join the virtual world with her. There's also been circumstances where marriages have been broken up because one of the parties decide they want to have a relationship with AI because it's easier. So is it fulfilling a need? Sort of, but at the cost of our own human connections.
Those stories, I mean, I know they've gotten a lot of press, and a lot of people are aware of what's happening, and it's heartbreaking, right? That we're putting these tools in the hands of students that don't yet have a lot of the guardrails to make those things not happen. So I know there's a question around the policies and how we can support students in using AI in a responsible way, and we'll dive into that. Morgan, I'm sure you have some thoughts there. And before we do that, though, I want to talk about what happens when AI becomes their only outlet, right? When Allison, you mentioned that it's a lot of those students who are kind of lonely, who don't have that, let's say, connection naturally in their day to day, and that they're filling these gaps because of their fear of judgment, because they feel like a burden. What happens, Morgan, when we say, well, here, talk to a bot, and like that's the solution? Or how do you think about that as a school leader, district leader?
It's one of those really big challenges that we run into. And so this AI is so new, we're still learning so much about it. And we just got to be realistic. Even when we first jumped into the cell phones, cell phones were a huge resource. Parents were going to be able to be in contact with their kids. You never had to worry about a kid breaking down alongside the road. But we never thought about all the other possibilities of now, who is my kid communicating with? What are they accessing? And we shouldn't be shocked that we see a huge increase in anxiety, depression, and so many other mental health issues because their life is tied to a phone. And now we're seeing the situation where the life is being tied to the AI bot on it. And it's a really situation of like, okay, great, here's a quick, easy fix. But sooner or later, we all get around to that situation of, is my only connection an AI bot? Is the only person who has time for me this little chat box? And unfortunately, I think we're looking down a really dangerous path that we're going to of removing away that human connection, that human interaction with it. And I wouldn't be surprised as we take a look years to come that we even see a greater spot of more students going into the depression and dealing with some of the anxiety, unable to communicate effectively with each other with it. And one of the nice parts, especially where we're located at, we're so on the more remote rural area, where we also deal with the situation of not having the best cell phone coverage. So kids actually have to go still talk with each other. And that's one of the nicest things is that, and so we just literally got back from DC, and our kids were complimented on how well they could effectively communicate, literally with senators and members of House of Representatives. And they're going, we don't even have staffers that can do it like this. And it's like human interaction, I think, is a huge value that AI is sort of taken away from. And hopefully, we don't ever get to the situation that a kid realizes that they're not even worth the human touch or the human interaction. Because I think that's where we end up seeing those huge spikes in suicide and some other terrible life decisions that are sometimes made because we've lost out on that human interaction.
Yeah, it makes me think of, I remember a couple years ago, this story really stuck with me. The student came in to chat with a coach, and again, Playful's real humans, not AI. And they started talking, and they were hesitant at first. And it was because they're like, well, I don't know if my issue's big enough. Like, I'm sure you have a lot of other people to talk to. Allison, I think it speaks to this like feeling like a burden that you mentioned. And uh, our coach, validated and said, no, of course, like we're here for you. We're here to talk about whatever. It could be, small things, big things. And the student shared that their dog had just passed away. And I think any of us who have lost pets throughout our lives know that that's actually a really huge deal, and you feel that very deeply. Uh, and it was this aha moment for me. And I'm like, wow, even when students are going through this big thing, they still, some of them like are so empathetic, where they see the line outside the counselor's office, or they see the wait list, and they're like, well, my issue's not big enough. And if that's how they feel already, what message do we send them when it's like, okay, now talk to this, only this AI robot is the thing that's here for you. I think it creates this ongoing sense of like, wait, so what am I worth? Like, so much of the feedback that we get from students is just like, thank you for spending time with me. Thank you for holding space, right? And we see, like, research shows how important holding that space is for mental health in general, right? So it's, I think there's a lot to think about there as you're like thinking, as you're kind of in your own schools and districts, thinking about how do we bring AI tools, where can they be really effective tools, right? Because that's what they are, tools for making life easier, for researching, comparing huge sets of data, or finding ways to give someone a really meaningful present, but not having it be a replacement for a lot of the important connection building that you all are doing day in and day out. Because at the end of the day, that's really what makes a difference, right? Research also shows that. And it sounds like from Morgan, what you just shared, that it also becomes a superpower when students are able to interact in this way. Joni, what have you seen in your own private practice, or in the speeches that you do, as this relates to like this being a superpower?
It's actually interesting that you just used that word superpower, because I gave a talk this morning about AI and mental health, and it was to a group of educators. And I actually told the educators, reminded them that human connection is their superpower. That they're the only ones that can offer true empathy, true support. And they're the only ones that can really model emotional intelligence skills. Or we talk about social emotional learning, that ability to be self-aware, to have self-control, motivation, and positive social skills. AI can't really effectively do that as a human being can, someone who is right in front of you face to face. And like I was saying before, kids, depending on the age range we're talking about, a lot of them didn't have the opportunity to build those kind of effective emotional intelligence skills. And that is so important moving forward, because that is the one thing that AI, I believe, is never going to be as effective at as a human being, simply because that is what connects us. And that connection that we have with another person is really what creates meaning and purpose in our lives. But the thing is, as some people, and certainly as students, get used to interacting with have the easy conversations with AI, even the social emotional skills that they have can atrophy, because just like if you go to the gym, and you work out, you lift a weight, you build a bicep muscle, you have a strong bicep. You stop going to the gym, you stop lifting that weight, eventually this muscle is going to atrophy. The same is true with skills that we have, like critical thinking, creativity, and emotional intelligence, that human connection factor. So those are the things that we need to make sure we are still cultivating, and that we are offering our students, because that is what makes us human. That is the best of humanity. And if we're all cultivating that, I don't think that AI can touch that. It can just be a skillful partner for us, in getting things done, in multiplying our efforts. But it can't take away those deep human qualities unless we choose to turn them over.
I love that so much, Joni. And it makes me think about this question of what is the unique value propositions that humans bring that no matter how good AI gets could never replace, right? And I love that you just gave a talk on this morning. 3 weeks ago, I was on another panel that was organized by youth organizers. It was 300 young people, high schoolers and college students, organized by high schoolers and college students, talking about the future of AI. And I asked them this question. I asked them, what do you think is uniquely human that AI can't replace no matter how good it gets? And so the chat box just lit up. It was like my aura, right? And then the whole, if you ever talk to a kiddo about what an aura is, I don't even know how to define that with you. We're gonna have to look it up on Urban Dictionary, right? But it was beautiful, right? Because they were like, yes, you can, no, you can't. There was this whole separate thread around what does it mean actually to mimic aura? What is aura? Because I think actually underneath that is a hugely philosophical question about what is the essence of what makes us human, right? And so when I dug in a little deeper, 2 things really popped up. And I'm not saying these are the only 2 things, but these are the 2 things that arose from that conversation. The first was wisdom. They're like, there's a difference between knowledge and wisdom, right? And when you talk to an elder, when you talk to someone older in your life, they might not know all the things, but they might offer wisdom in a perspective that you've never thought of before. And the second part they were saying is imagination. They're like, we get to imagine. LLMs cannot imagine. They are just probabilistic models. They are derivative. They are flattening, right? They're very good at particular tasks. Don't get me wrong. But so I named that just to say that actually young people are very attuned to this question, right? They're asking themselves this question all the time, and we need to give them space to make meaning of all that. And then the second thing that I will name is I was talking to another high schooler who was building an AI dating coach. I was like, why are you building that? What made you want to build this AI dating coach? And she told me, people my age are really struggling with romance right now. We're really struggling to date. The people are struggling to talk to each other. It's really scary. And when we ask our parents are like, just go ask them out, dummy, right? Their advice is actually not that supportive to what they're grappling with in the world. And I was like, can you bring me into a story? Can you give me an example? I'm not going to tell her one of her stories, but I'm going to actually tell a story from my own life. My partner has a 15-year-old son. I'm going to name his name, keep him anonymous. He was staying with us this summer and he had a crush on a girl. We nicknamed her Lightning. And we were one night he walks up to me. He's like, Allie, I think I did something bad. I dropped our snap streak. And it was 1,000+ snap streak. And now I think she's mad at me and she won't respond to my messages. And I was like, I think I know what a snap streak is. I'm not that out of touch. I'm like, but I have no idea what that signals, right? I'm like, I don't know. Is she upset at you? And he was like, do I spend money to restore the snap streak? Do I just try to start it all over again? Do I apologize? Do I act like nothing's happened? And I'm like, bro, I don't know, that's tough, right? And so I was not able to technically satisfy what he has. But I mean that just to say, but I don't think I have nothing to offer him. I can sit with him in that discomfort. I can help him navigate what does this young woman mean to you, right? How might you show care in the ways that matter? Right? How do you navigate maybe making more time to actually be present for her, even though the snap streak's not there anymore, to motivate continual conversation, right? So all of that to say is that AI is not going anywhere. Young people will probably continue to use AI in the same way that we Google everything now. They will continue to ask AI lots of things. But the question is, how do we help them create agency so that they see it as a tool in their toolbox alongside all of these other beautiful human resources in their lives at their disposal? Yeah.
Such an interesting question. And I think we'll find that different companies and different products are positioning themselves quite differently, right? As you all are talking, I'm thinking about like Anthropic's positioning, how it's all about like thinking and like not building that atrophy. Whereas other organizations might be less keen to kind of lean into that positioning or marketing message. And as consumers, we all have an opportunity to define like which tools do we want to use and which ones do we want to support. And that's one of the things I definitely want you all to take away is that like you all have a lot of power in what you use, what you support your students using, and really looking at the ethics behind a lot of these tools, how they're thinking about ethical product design, how they're thinking about the ways in which the user engages. Product design is so powerful, and I saw a reel the other day of a guy who created a 5-pound case for his phone so that just so he wouldn't hold it for as long as he does today. And it was just this like beautiful, I'm a mechanical engineer, so I was like really fascinated by this. It's like this metal case, and it's a beautiful way to design a product to break some of the habits that we've created of like picking up our phone all the time, right? Because it's heavy, and once it's heavy, then you don't want to do it as much. So I'm just sharing that to say that there's a lot of intentional product design, like them always being super validating and being so friendly that it's there to keep us engaged. We have an opportunity to define which tools we use so that it's aligned with the use that we want to have in our lives. And we'll talk more about that. Before we get there, I really wanted to lean into the wisdom point that you said, especially because there's some questions around policies. I was at a conference in February, the Common Sense Media Conference, and these young people were talking about creating an AI policy for their schools, and which again, love bringing young people in and co-creating with them. So the student went in and asked, as one does, asked AI to create an AI policy for the school. And he looked it over. He's like, this looks great. Handed it over to the principal and then got it back a week later and it was completely redone. And he had this moment of realization. He said, I don't know what a policy looks like, right? This looked good to me, but like, I've never written a policy. I'm not the leader of a school. I don't know what it should look like. So once the principal who has experience, who's built policies, who understands what this should look like, got it, she was able to do a lot of different things with it and actually create something that worked for them. So it speaks to that like wisdom versus knowledge, right? Like the models can output a lot of information, but if you don't have the context or the understanding or the wisdom or the history to understand whether that is the right output or not, it's not useful, right? So how do we teach our kids what that context is, what the, in this case, what the policy should look like, so that when they're using it as a tool, they know what to use, right? It's kind of like building the wrong IKEA furniture because you don't have the instructions or you don't know what it's going to look like. Because at the end of the day, we need to keep it front of mind that it is a tool at the core. Because we're talking about what humans can do that AI can't. So we're in this like very unique space as Clayful because we started before generative AI was a thing, and but it's all chat based, right? Students are connecting within 60 seconds, so it's getting a lot of the value. It's like a similar value proposition to what AI can offer, and they're chatting back and forth. And what I think is so fascinating is every time we're introduced to a new school, the students are always testing us, like, are you AI? Are you AI? Are you not? Are you real? Are you not? And it's this like really funny back and forth with our coaches, trying to prove like their aura, trying to prove that they're real people. So like, yeah, look, I have a dog. Here's what my dog's name is. Like, they're like, insert a typo because they know bots don't make typos. So like, we have some plays that we run to help young people understand, like, yes, we are real people. And then I wanted to share with you some of the topics that we all kind of receive as an organization. So these are just from the last school year. These are the things that students have been talking to us about. So you see a lot of like not surprising things here. If you think about like middle school and high school students, these kind of make sense, right? Like academic pressure being a thing, romance, very big up there. And I think the note I'll make with romance is there's we always review this data with our district partners. And oftentimes they're surprised by how high romance is, because their kids aren't coming to them to talk about their crushes and talk about what they need to do and what happens when they break the Snapchat streak. And it's because, like, by providing this service where we're decreasing that judgment, right? Where, you know, they might feel uncomfortable to go into the counselor's office and say, like, hey, we just broke up and, like, I don't know what to do. I'm distraught. But they'll, you know, they're connecting with each other every day via text, so they're more likely to open up in that way. So we see a lot of things that counselors it doesn't usually match with the themes that they're seeing, at least in terms of like how often they're coming in and talking about it. But you see a lot of the things, again, like family dynamics, friendships, future goal setting, executive functioning. So all of the breadth of topics that our coaches cover is quite wide. And then I started going through and seeing, like, again, trying to identify, like, what's the difference between AI and human. And so much of it was just, I just needed a quick chat, right? I just needed that quick moment of connection. I just needed to talk to someone, right? So I think about those students that are lonely, that are sitting in the back of the classroom, that are that don't have friends yet. Maybe they're brand new to the school. Maybe they've been in the school forever, but just like haven't been able to create a community. How do we help them find a safe place to talk and connect with a real human that can provide that real empathy? So it's actually like nutritious connection and not artificial. I remember someone talking about like AI being and social media being like junk food, and that really resonated with me. And then I wanted to just share with you some of the feedback that we get after the chat. And I think these really encapsulate why, like, what's unique about the human connection, right? So the person listening to me, right, Ali, you didn't need to fix the Snapchat streak. We just held them and made that space for them. They didn't write like a robot, right? So to your point, like they're really attuned to this, and they understand that talking to a real person really matters. Holding space for letting them get stuff off their chest. It talked to me like a normal person, not a script, right? So, I mean, if all of us can now tell whether an email is written by AI or not, young people can tell that too, right? And they're even maybe more sensitive to it than some of us are. So realizing that, like, they have a lot of the agency in this too, and they recognize it. This one really is a heartwarmer to me, right? I have a lot of people in my house and I still feel really alone. You made my lonely night a little bit warmer, right? So, like, what can that little bit of human connection do to a student that really makes a huge difference in their lives? So as we're thinking about different ways to bring AI into the fold, whether it's like AI tutors or, you know, or AI mental health supports, how can we still keep this humanity and this human connection at the center of it? Because the feeling that students get with this versus just, oh, okay, I got the tool that I was looking for, or I was able to find the strategy that I needed, is very different and fulfills a very different part of their needs. So I want to now talk about agency, because I know both Allison and Jody, you talked about ways and strategies that you all are using with in the work that you're doing. How do we banning AI is not the answer, right? we need to give them the skills to decide when AI is helpful, when it's not. How can we do that? Allison, I'm going to talk to you first.
Yeah, I'll just start by saying that the mission of the Rhythm Project is to help young people find their agency, to center human connection in this age of AI. And part of that is developing their critical discernment. How do they choose the way that this technology shows up in their life? How do they develop the criticality to look at a piece of technology and examine how it's showing up and say, I want more of this and I want less of that, because I know what matters to me, right? And so we're very careful actually to not tell kids what to think or what to do, because oftentimes that only gets you so far. And even if you tell them what to do or what to think, they oftentimes go and do exactly that thing. They just go behind your back, right? So it often doesn't work. And I'll say that we have to give young people credit. They are navigating this new world. They have grown up in a world where their lives have been shaped by algorithms. And when I talk to them about this topic, many of them are skeptical, nervous, and quite have some pretty strong gut intuitions about what feels right or wrong about this AI world, right? And yet, when I ask them, like, where do you go to have these conversations? They're like, well, I can't talk to the adults in my life because either they're telling us just don't do it, or I feel judged by them, or I feel like if I tell them, they're going to punish me for it, right? Or dismiss it. And with even between my peers, I feel like there's a stigma, right? It's like everyone's doing it, but no one's telling each other, right? And so what we did at the Rhythm Project was like, oh, we can't leave kids to wheel spin on their own to make meaning of this new world. What they really need is actually space to make meaning together, to make it clear and hold space for them to make meaning. What matters to them? What feels like the new moral and social norms that need to be co-designed with young people? And so what we have, all that to say, is a set of conversation starters that we call the Sparks Toolkit. And they're a set of activities that are designed to stoke conversations about human connection in the age of AI. And they span from card games that you can play very quickly at the dinner table, whether it's with your family, or we've done it in schools all around the country. Our college students have brought it into their student orgs. It goes from games to discussion starters to different conversation maps. And so all of these, again, are playful, joyful, community-based ways to enter into the conversation around why does human connection matter? And how is this tech poised to either augment or erode our human connection, the things that matter to us most, so that we can ask, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it in your life? And then what are you going to do about it as people in the world that have power to shape what the future looks like?
I love that. And I just shared the link in the chat for everyone so you all can access it. We actually use this in our organization as well. During all hands, we put it together and pulled out a bunch of different questions. And it is so interesting what people's point of views are and how you think about, like if I think one of the questions was like a friend texted you and would you rather them like reply right away using an AI message or not message back for a week? And you start to think about like, well, is an AI message even a reply, or what's like authentic connection, what's not? So we end up having some really compelling conversations. And I think just like creating that space for young people to be able to both like share what they think and also have conversations with adults around it is so meaningful and can create this like judgment-free space, right? Which is kind of at the core of why they're using these tools to begin with, right? Because they want a place where they don't feel judged. So feel free to take a look and use them and share back what you learn in your conversations. Joni, I know you've been doing a ton of research for your book and have a bunch of resources as well.
I do. First of all, I want to say, Allie, I love the Sparks Toolkit. I've been kind of looking at it and playing with it myself, and definitely going to share that as a resource. So really, really great stuff. One of the things that I'm finding in my research, and something that's helpful not only for an individual personally, but for a family or any kind of system, whether it's a classroom, an organization, is to come up with principles for intentional AI use. And I have links on my website. First of all, I have a summary of key points anytime I give a talk on what I call the AI antidote. So there's that link. And then I have principles for intentional AI use. very similar, but a little bit more condensed than the Sparks Toolkit. Like that offers really specific scenarios. This is kind of more general, like the first couple of principles that I kind of crafted from my research. The first one is activate your human capital first. So that means you do the first round of brainstorming or having a conversation before you turn your creativity and critical thinking over to AI. The second one is lead the co-creation. So again, you're not completely surrendering everything to AI. And then it goes on from there. Also, a link on my website, I have kind of a little simple guide to how do you craft your own principles. And it's basically just a list of questions. I think first and foremost, it is really important, and this echoes what Ali said. You have to figure out what is most important to you. Like it's really about figuring out what your values are. What is most important to you? What do you want to strengthen in yourself as a human being? And then making sure that you create your own ethical AI principles that support that. And really like make a commitment to follow that, because it's all too easy to just kind of fall into the rabbit hole of letting AI do everything. But then we're losing those essential pieces that are the best of our humanity. So I think really important stuff to think about creating guidelines for yourself, your family, and again, your organization around AI use. Oh, and I'll mention my book upcoming, hopefully will be a great resource. It'll be released in December. I have a Zoom release launch of my book, December 15th, I think it is, but there's a link to that on my website as well, if you want to get invited to that.
I'll definitely be there. No, I think everything you just said makes so much sense. And I'm a big fan of Common Sense Media. They've done a lot of work to help kind of bridge that gap in digital literacy over the last, decade or two. And one of the things that they always talk about is the need to help young people kind of develop that set of values. And I remember when my cousins, I think they were juniors, one was a junior, one was a freshman in high school, saw The Social Dilemma, and they realized like how these algorithms work and how if you're not the product, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. And it kind of opened their eyes in a way that was like, well, I don't want these. If there's anything young people don't want, is to be controlled, right? So like, I don't want these algorithms controlling me. I need my agency. I need my independence. And it really kind of opened their eyes and helped them define what kind of role they wanted social media to play. So one of them deleted it. One said, okay, I'm only going to use Instagram for X amount of time a day, and started to notice, okay, what was the impact of using those tools in their emotional and physical health? One said, I want to practice. I want to be running because I have my soccer practice every day, and I don't want to spend that time on Instagram instead. So again, giving young people the agency to develop that themselves. And thank you for sharing these resources so educators here can support their own selves and teams and students to do that too. Because I feel like when it comes from within you, you're much more likely to actually kind of embark on the changes that might be necessary. I know for me, one of the things that I've been really conscious of since I started hearing about this muscle atrophy piece is not surrendering my email writing to AI, but rather always trying to write the email myself. Sometimes I'll have it, make it less wordy or fix my grammar, but really trying to keep that humanity. Because I remember someone saying, like, if you didn't spend the time to write the email, why would I spend the time to read it? And that really stuck with me. And it goes back to this humanity piece, right? So now you send me an email that's written by AI, I may not read it. Morgan, I see you've been typing away, talking about policy. I know, like, one of the big questions I have around this work is when it comes to equity and like how this affects communities that are rural, where connectivities may not be a constant, versus urban communities that are very highly connected, where maybe your students have the opportunity to, or the requirement to hang out with each other more because they don't have the constant connectivity. And even like, what does it mean when you can't just like have another counselor poof when you need one? You have to rely on a lot of these digital tools to kind of create access for people. So how are you thinking about this from like an equity perspective, to make sure that young people are getting what they need, but we're not kind of breaking things along the way? Mute button is lost.
Sorry
There
about
you
that. There we
go.
go. It's one of those really interesting challenges that we deal with, and it's a spot where AI is so helpful to be able to get a quick answer for anything, but it also really is that situation where I think businesses and corporations are also going to be looking for those people who can still have that human connection. And I think that's one of the things that I'll be honest with you, in our rural communities, we have students who don't have access to broadband in some locations. Unless you've got access to Starlink, you're out of luck. And some folks just can't afford that. But when they get to school, that's when they get a chance to get to the hook into our Wi-Fi and all of a sudden start chatting. But it is that situation too, where I do think it's that sort of touched upon earlier. Our kids have that ability to interact with each other. And, you go to some other places, you'll see kids literally sitting across the lunchroom table who are busy chatting to each other and not talking to each other in a normal old person way. And, the new way is always the stupid chats and everything else with the thumbs. But we actually have a chance to actually start seeing kids who start to talk with each other. And Allie had a good comment or question on there, just sort of about how do we go about teaching these kids these skills when we're sort of the AI push. And I think a lot of it begins very early. In our public schools, we started pushing basically the iPad it's all the way down to our kindergarten kids to help them play the fun games and learn how to read, learn their alphabet, learn how to count. We're actually taking all those away from our kids at the lower grade levels because we want them to actually learn because they need to learn by doing, but also they need to be reading to each other instead of just having something being read to them. We need those kids having those interactions. And we're still struggling with how high should we go on the grade levels before we turn it over to the students back to make sure that they aren't technologically at a disadvantage, but still having the capability to have that personal communication taking place on a daily basis with their peers. And like I said, it's still so early, and so it's still a huge rush. We've unleashed AI, which is a huge resource for everybody. I do think there is going to be a gap, but I think sometimes that gap can also be a powerful thing for some of our kids because they can effectively communicate with other people face to face. And I think that's one of the things that's a promising thing for our children here in our rural communities. But same time too, we'll have to see how things play out. It's just so early in this whole gamut of technology.
And someone in the, I think it was Ali said, do we really just believe the genie's out of the bottle and we just have to accept it and move on? And I do think the genie's out of the bottle, right? Like these technologies have been growing so quickly and getting into the hands, not just directly like through their own apps, but by embedding themselves in all the different apps that we all use. So I think the answer is yes. And you as a consumer have power, right? How you use it, how you define it, how you choose what tools to use is huge. And how we help our young people understand the power of that, of the different tools and how they want the tools to be embedded in their lives is I think the place where we can have the biggest impact, because the more informed that they are, the informed decisions they can make, right?
I think you just touched upon a huge part there, Maria, just because the kids have such a distrust of being sort of led by logarithms. That everybody knows that, okay, this is how you're going to point me down this path, so I don't even want to deal with it. So I think we're at a really interesting pivot point too. And it's going to be interesting to see where it goes. Do we just like, well, accept it? Great, the logarithm's going to point me down this direction and I'm just going to follow. Or are we going to see a situation of people saying, I want some control. I want some control back in my life. Only time will tell.
Gosh, I love that so much, Morgan. And I actually hear that increasingly more and more from young people too. That young people are actually the ones that are calling for skepticism and a call for, hey, like stop shoving this down our throats, right? I just had lunch actually earlier today with one of my youth fellows, Marisol, a little bit of Marisol. She is first generation Mexican American, first in her family to go to college, and she is the eldest of 5 daughters, grew up in East LA. And she was telling me, Allie, I all 5 of my parents' daughters are using AI. She's the oldest of 5 daughters. Her youngest sister is 14 years old, just turned 14, 16, and then the 2 twins, her and her sister, who are 22. And then I think there's another sister in between there somewhere. And she's like, and yet my parents don't know what AI is, right? My dad is a mechanic. My mom is a stay-at-home mom. I try to translate artificial intelligence into Spanish, and they're like, it doesn't translate. They don't understand it. They don't know what it is. And so what we're hearing from her is that, like, for so many young people, being able to even understand and comprehend and have adults that guide what AI use looks like in their life is baked into the inequities, right? So whether you have an adult, whether that is a parent or a caregiver or an educator that is tech savvy enough to be like, oh, let me show you how to use this in ways that's in service of your learning or in service of your connection rather than in erosion of that, right? That is inequitable by design. It doesn't matter whether that's urban or rural. I think that's probably patterns, because we know that inequities and economic inequities are also are disparate in different regions. And then the second thing she said to me was her 14-year-old sister, Marisol is an engineer. She graduated as an engineer, and she works in AI. And her sister dunks on her all the time. She's like, Marisol, I can't believe you work in AI. I hate AI. I hate anyone who uses AI. I think AI is the worst, and I don't understand why everyone's trying to shove AI down our throat. And she's like, well, don't you use AI on Snapchat? Like, and so she's like, there's like this sort of like, you might hate it, but you're still using it. And so it's like a duality, right? Like those things they're not diametrically opposed, but there are multiple truths here that young people are saying, I don't like this technology. I'm deeply skeptical of it. I am tired of being monetized. They have an intuition about the ways that they're being manipulated. And if there's anything that teens don't like, it's being manipulated or controlled, right? Or having power used over them. And they do get the sense that, like, why is everyone trying to like put this? Like, I want AI as a tool, but I don't want it to take over my life. Right. And so I think there is something about how do we get more young people, again, to talk about this so that they can cultivate that discernment and then also help stoke their movement building. Because I think, yes, maybe the genie's out of the lamp, right? The tech bros are going to tech bro. They're going to build what they're going to build. And we get to make a choice about how that shows up in our life, right? So when Sam Altman says that he's going to bring erotica into ChatGPT, the public, get to decide how we respond to that. What we decide, what the new social norms, how we talk about it, what we decide we want in our lives and what we don't want in our lives. And so I think that's both from a consumer perspective, as a community perspective, on the individual perspective, but it needs to happen through conversation. Like we need to be talking about it or else we give up all that power entirely.
Yeah, and that's why I'm so grateful that you all joined us today, because just by being here, you're having this conversation, you're hearing these different stories, these different things, and you're going to be more aware and attuned to what's happening in your own communities. For those of you who might not know, in California, they just passed a bill to require these chatbots to, especially when we're dealing with young people, to remind them that it's a chat bot, that it's not a human. To have very robust escalation protocols if there's any sort of conversation around harm being discussed. So your voice matters, right? It's because of these really terrifying, terrible stories that have happened, that have made the news, that have created a demand, that have demanded action from our legislation. And because of that, they're actually doing something. So I would definitely emphasize that you all continue to look out for these stories in your own community and use your local media to start telling these stories, both of like positive use and when it's not so positive, because that makes a difference, right? That's when the tools and our governments are forced, if you will, to make changes and to create rules that are actually going to be beneficial to the consumer. We've been down this road before with social media, so we should know better at this point, right? But these technologies are moving so fast that the more that we can all come together and again vote with our use and use our voice to tell those stories and help young people tell those stories, the better. After this webinar, I will also share some resources that, on top of the ones that were shared here today, that I've kind of compiled over the course of the last, I don't know, couple of months as people are kind of making these decisions. So hopefully that can help bridge the gap in some of the stuff that you all are thinking about. And again, I'm so grateful for this conversation. By just being here, you're one step further ahead and making sure that you understand the dynamics, because it's not black and white, right? It's mucky and it's sticky, and we have to sit in that discomfort, because at the end of the day, it's not a question around whether AI is going to be around, but it's how it's going to shape our lives and our kids, and how we choose to let it shape our lives and our kids, especially and what we can do to not have it be a negative influence, if we can kind of fill some of those gaps around creating judgment-free spaces, creating spaces where students feel not lonely, and where they're filling those gaps in other ways, so that they don't have to resort to AI to find that. So thank you all so much. I will send the recording as well. Thank you to our amazing panelists. Thank you for sharing your incredible expertise here, and hopefully we can do this again one day. Thank you all. Mm.